A week. Just one F***king week after our wedding, and my world started falling apart like wet paper in the rain. Her name is Madison Maddie, as I used to call her before that word started tasting like poison. The kind of girl who could turn every head in a room without even trying. Beautiful, yes, but cunning too. The kind of cunning you don't notice until it's wrapping around your throat. We got married on a Sunday. By Friday, her parents, Robert and Susan, all polished smiles and uptight suits, said they were taking her on a family trip. Some lake house retreat. Old family tradition, they claimed. No spouses allowed. She kissed me goodbye like everything was normal. Like I wasn't about to get played like a damn fool. She was gone for 4 days. When she came back, I knew something was off. You know how you can feel when someone's spirit doesn't walk into the room with them? That was Maddie. Her body stepped through the door, but the love, the warmth, the spark, the softness, it was gone. She didn't even hug me. Instead, she dropped her bag, sat on the edge of the couch, and said, "I think we should take a break." Just like that. No tears. No build-up. Just a stone-cold line from a woman who had promised forever less than 10 days ago. But me? I didn't flinch. I had already done my homework. I walked into the room slowly, pulled out the thick envelope I had tucked behind a copy of Men's Health, and dropped it in her lap. "That's funny," I said. My voice was calm, too calm, because I just got some information on that trip. She looked at me like I'd handed her a rattlesnake. Her fingers trembled as she opened the folder, and inside, printouts, screenshots, hotel confirmations, GPS data from her iPhone that I pulled with a quiet little app she never even knew I had. Pictures. Yeah, pictures. Of her. Of a guy. Not just one guy, two on different days. One of them, I recognized from the wedding. A family friend. Blonde, cocky, name was Blake. The type who wears loafers without socks and flirts with the bride when the groom's not looking. The other was a mystery, but I'd figure him out later. She flipped through the photos, slower and slower, her face shifting from confusion to guilt to something I didn't expect, rage. Not at me. At her parents. She snapped her head to the side like a whip. "What the hell is this?" She barked at them. Robert stood frozen. Susan looked like she just swallowed a lemon. "I told you this would come out," I said. "I gave you all a chance to say something. I begged for honesty, remember? Let me tell you something, man to man. There's a moment when betrayal stops hurting and starts boiling. When you no longer feel the sadness, because the fury is hotter." That was me, standing in that room, watching my new wife crumble into a cocktail of lies, shame, and stupid choices. "What did you do, Madison?" I asked. She stayed quiet. Of course she did. But Susan opened her mouth. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "Don't," I snapped. "Don't even try to spin it." I turned back to Maddie. "You met Blake there. You met him the first night. Checked into a separate room from your parents, stayed out until 3 a.m., skipped breakfast the next morning. And then, 2 days later, you met some other dude at that little winery 45 minutes out. Didn't think I'd find out, huh?" Her lip quivered. Still no apology. Still no shame. Just anger that she'd been caught. "What do you want me to say?" she hissed. It didn't mean anything. And right there, I laughed. I actually F***king laughed. "You wrecked our marriage in a week for something that didn't mean anything?" I asked. "Was it worth it, Maddie? Was the thrill really that good?" She stood up. "You don't understand." I panicked. "Okay." Everything moved too fast. I needed space. "Space?" I repeated. "So you took your vows, smiled for the camera, and then used your family trip to blow off steam with 2 different guys?" That's when she crossed the line. "You weren't supposed to find out." She said it like I'd ruined her game. Like I was the problem. And suddenly, I saw her for what she was. Not the girl I married. Not the woman I thought I loved. But a manipulative little performer who got bored of her own script and decided to burn down the stage. I looked at her one last time and said, "We're not taking a break, Maddie. We're done. You broke it. You torched it. And now you're going to watch it burn." I walked out. The folder was still in her hands. Her eyes followed me like she wanted to scream, cry, throw something, but nothing came. I didn't sleep that night. I just drove. No destination, no music, just the hum of the engine and my heartbeat thumping in my ears. I ended up in a parking lot near the marina, watching the waves crash against the dock, feeling like each one slammed against my chest. I'd never felt so alone. So used. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It wasn't just the images of her wrapped up in other men that haunted me. It was how effortlessly she lied. How easy it was for her to look me in the eyes, kiss me goodbye, and go off on that family trip like nothing was wrong. She had a future in her hands. Our future. And she crushed it like a beer can. I kept replaying the moment she said, "You weren't supposed to find out." That sentence hit harder than the photos. It wasn't regret. It was disappointment that her plan didn't stay hidden. No, I'm sorry. No tears. Just frustration that her mask had slipped. By morning, I was running on rage and caffeine. I went home, packed her stuff into boxes, no care, no folding, just shoving. I didn't even think twice when I tossed her perfume collection in the trash. Her scent used to calm me. Now it made me want to gag. Around noon, I got a text from her. "We need to talk. Please." Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I messed up." Just a weak attempt to take back control. I didn't respond. But later that evening, there was a knock at my door. She stood there, wearing the same hoodie she used to sleep in at my place before we got married. A fake symbol of comfort. I didn't even let her in. I didn't know what I was doing, she started, eyes a little glassy. "Save it," I said. "You had choices. You made them." I was scared, Ryan. Her voice shook. I felt trapped, like I was losing who I was. "You chose to get married. You said yes. You walked down that aisle. I thought it would help." "Help what, Madison? Help you fix yourself by screwing other people?" She flinched, then crossed her arms like she was still the victim. "You don't know what it's like having everyone expect you to be perfect. My parents, you." I couldn't breathe. "I never asked you to be perfect," I shot back. "I asked you to be honest." There was silence between us, heavy and cold. She looked at the boxes by the door. Her things, her lies, her mistakes, all packed up like yesterday's trash. "I didn't mean to hurt you," she whispered. "That doesn't matter." "You did." She reached out to touch my arm, but I stepped back. "You lost that, right?" She stared at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. Maybe she didn't. I wasn't the same guy who married her last week. That guy believed in her, trusted her. That guy was dead. "You're really throwing this away?" she asked. "No," I said. "You did." I closed the door in her face. And for a moment, I expected her to bang on it, scream, beg. But she didn't. She left. I watched her from the window as she walked to her car, her steps uncertain, slow, almost like she expected me to chase her. I didn't. That night, I sat on the couch in the dark, a bottle of whiskey in one hand and my wedding photo in the other. Her smile in that photo used to make me feel like the luckiest man alive. Now it looked like a mask I hadn't seen through. I poured another drink. My hands were shaking, not from the booze, but from all the emotions spiraling inside me. Anger, betrayal, grief, humiliation. I felt like a fool, a clown in my own story. How many people knew? How many saw the cracks before I did? The worst part wasn't the cheating. It was how little she seemed to care. The next morning, her father showed up at my door. Alone. "I had no idea," he said. "I'm sorry, son." I stared at him. The same man who raised her. The same man who vouched for her. Was this real? Or damage control? "She lied to everyone," I said. "But mostly to me." He nodded slowly. "If it means anything, she's devastated." "She's caught," I corrected. "Not devastated." He didn't argue. Maybe because he knew I was right. "I raised her better than this," he muttered. I looked at him. Jaw tight? Apparently not. And with that, I shut the door again. I wasn't looking for sympathy. Not from him. Not from anyone. I was a man who got married and got betrayed in under 10 days. And now, I was a man rebuilding from ground zero. The days that followed felt like walking through a storm that never let up. Everywhere I went, there were reminders, our wedding photos still set as my laptop background, the unopened registry gifts stacked in the corner of the living room, her voice echoing in my head like a ghost I couldn't shake. I stopped going into work. My boss, Greg, called twice. Left a message saying he understood I was going through something. I didn't respond. What was I supposed to say? "Hey, Greg, my wife cheated on me 3 days after our honeymoon, and now I can't walk past a damn toaster without wanting to scream?" Yeah, no. I deleted her from my phone, but I didn't block her. I don't know why. Maybe some sick part of me wanted to see her name pop up again, just to know she was still suffering. Or maybe I was waiting for her to admit everything, to break. But she didn't. Instead, she posted a photo on Instagram. Her, out at brunch with her mom and some friends. Smiling, laughing, acting like the last week hadn't been a complete emotional massacre. No ring on her finger, of course. Just her, playing the victimless villain. I stared at that photo for a long time. And I felt it, that familiar gut punch. She was already moving on, already rewriting the narrative. That night, I got a call from Jason, my best friend since high school. He didn't know everything yet, but he knew something was wrong. He said we should grab a drink. I told him I wasn't in the mood. He didn't listen. Showed up with a six-pack, some junk food, and that stupid loyalty that only comes from growing up together. We didn't talk at first. Just drank. Watched TV. Let the silence fill in the blanks. Eventually, he asked, "You gonna tell me what happened?" I paused. Then I told him everything. The photos. The fake family trip. The two guys. Her face when I handed her the file. Her words, "You weren't supposed to find out." Jason didn't say anything at first. Just shook his head and let out a low whistle. "She's a damn snake," he muttered. "Always thought she was too polished. Too perfect." "Yeah, well," I said, "perfect people don't need 2D **K vacations while their husband's home waiting." Jason barked out a laugh and then got serious again. "So what now?" "I don't know," I said honestly. "I feel like I'm stuck in this purgatory between rage and heartbreak. One minute I want to destroy everything she touched, and the next, I miss her." Jason nodded. "That's normal. Doesn't mean she deserves it." The worst part wasn't just missing her. It was missing the version of her I thought was real. The Maddie who used to sneak into my office during lunch breaks with coffee and a smile. The Maddie who danced with me in the kitchen at midnight. The Maddie who didn't exist. Later that week, I got a knock on the door again. This time, it wasn't Maddie. It was Blake. Yeah, that Blake. One of the guys from the trip. The one from the wedding. He looked nervous. No smugness. Just sweaty palms and darting eyes. I just wanted to talk," he said. "You've got 5 seconds to turn around before this gets ugly," I said, voice flat. "Please," he said, holding his hands up. I didn't know she was married. She told me they weren't doing the wedding after all. That she broke it off. I stared at him. "She told you she canceled the wedding?" He nodded. "Said it was too fast, that she realized you weren't the one." The audacity. I laughed, loud and humorless. "So what? You thought she just wanted a vacation hookup? A rebound honeymoon minus the groom?" He looked down. I didn't ask questions. Of course not. Why ruin the fantasy, right? He tried to hand me something, his phone. "Look, I have texts. Screenshots. I'm not trying to defend myself. I just thought you should see them." I took the phone and scrolled. There they were. Her messages. Her words. Leading him on. Making plans. Telling him she missed him already the night she got back. I gave him back the phone. "Get the hell off my porch, Blake." He didn't argue. But I couldn't unsee what I saw. She hadn't just made a mistake. This wasn't a one-time thing. It was deliberate. Calculated. She went on that trip with every intention of doing what she did. And then came back to me, told me she wanted a break, and acted like it was a favor. I sat down, staring at the floor, the silence thick around me. My phone buzzed again. A message from Maddie. "Can we please just talk? One last time. I swear I'll tell you the truth." I stared at the screen. And for the first time in days, I considered it. I told her to come by at 6. I don't know why I said yes. Maybe I needed closure. Maybe I wanted to see if there was even a flicker of guilt left in her eyes. Or maybe I just wanted to see her fall apart one more time. At 6:03, she knocked. She walked in wearing that soft gray sweater I bought her last Christmas, like it would somehow earn her pity points. Her hair was pulled back, no makeup. She looked like she wanted to appear vulnerable, but all I saw was manipulation dressed in nostalgia. We sat across from each other in silence for a long time. Her eyes scanned the room, probably noticing all the little things I had moved or thrown away. Our wedding photo was gone from the wall. Her books were missing from the shelf. The blanket she always used was folded and shoved in a box by the door. "I didn't come to fight," she said finally. "No, you came to lie better than the last time." Her jaw clenched. "I'm not proud of what I did." "Then why did you do it?" She looked down, then back up, and for a split second, I thought I saw real emotion. But it was fleeting. "I didn't plan it," she said. "But once it started, I couldn't stop. I wanted something that felt exciting again." "Exciting," I said, laughing under my breath. "So what? I stopped thrilling you. 10 days in. It wasn't just about you," she snapped. "It was everything. My parents pushing me into the wedding, everyone expecting us to be perfect. They didn't push you to climb into bed with 2 guys." Silence. "I made a mistake," she said finally. "A really big one." I panicked. "You panicked?" I repeated, letting the words hang there. "You panicked. So you cheated on your husband with 2 men and lied to his face and told your little fling that the wedding was canceled. Her face twitched. I saw the texts, Madison. She closed her eyes. I didn't know how to end it, she whispered. I kept thinking I'd fix it somehow, that maybe if we took a break, you'd forget about it? Pretend it didn't happen. She didn't answer. You're not sorry for cheating, I said. You're sorry I found out. You're sorry the curtain got pulled back and the audience saw who you really are. Her voice turned ice cold. You think you're so righteous. Like you didn't do anything wrong. You were distant, Ryan. You were always busy. You never made me feel wanted anymore. I leaned forward. You wanted fireworks every night. You wanted constant attention like we were still in the honeymoon phase of dating. But marriage isn't just excitement, Madison. It's work. It's trust. And you burned both to the ground for a 4-day ego trip. She stood up, eyes glossy with something that looked like tears. But I couldn't trust it anymore. She could have been rehearsing this speech in the mirror for days, for all I knew. I don't want to lose you, she said. You already did. Her lip trembled. I'll do anything to make it right. Great, I said. Start by leaving. Her eyes widened. You're just done. You made it easy. She stepped closer. You don't even want to try? Don't you love me? I paused. That question hit something deep. I loved the woman I thought you were. But she's dead. You killed her. She stared at me like she was seeing me for the first time. And then, the mask slipped. You think you're better than me? She snapped. You think I'm the only one who ever had doubts? You think you're the victim here? No, I said, standing. I know I am. I opened the door. She looked at me for a long second, and then something shifted in her eyes. Not sadness. Not remorse. Contempt. She grabbed her purse, muttered something under her breath, and walked out without another word. This time, I didn't watch her go. I just closed the door and locked it behind her. And I stood there, just breathing, letting the silence settle into the space she used to fill. For the first time, it felt like I could finally start to reclaim it. I didn't cry. Not then, not after she left, not even when I lay in bed that night staring at the ceiling, thinking about every moment we'd ever shared. I was past that. Crying is something you do when you still have hope, when you still care enough to mourn what's lost. What I felt wasn't grief anymore, it was clarity. The morning after she walked out, I opened every window in the house. Let the cold air in. Let it hit my skin and shake off whatever pieces of her were still clinging to me. I threw away the last of the wedding souvenirs, her vows, the invitation cards, the champagne bottle we never opened. Every item felt like part of a script she wrote to keep me blind. And I'd played my role too well. I needed something to ground me, so I called Jason again. Told him everything. Every brutal detail. The texts. The confrontation. Her twisted logic. The look in her eyes when she realized I wasn't going to break. She's sick, man, he said. That girl's got poison in her veins. She's a damn actress, I muttered. Made me believe every lie with a smile. He invited me to stay at his place for a few days, said it might help to get out of that haunted house. I packed a bag and headed over. We sat on his porch drinking beers, the same porch where we used to sit as teenagers and dream about our futures. Funny how none of those dreams ever included betrayal or lies, or standing in your own house with your wife telling you she needed space after screwing someone on a vineyard tour. I can't believe you kept it together, Jason said. Most guys would have snapped. I wanted to, I admitted. You know what stopped me? That look in her eyes when she got caught. She didn't look sorry. She looked inconvenienced. Like I ruined her weekend. Jason clenched his jaw. Some people don't deserve second chances. She doesn't deserve any. We were quiet for a while. Then he turned to me. You know Blake came by my shop? What? Yeah. Said he felt bad. Said she told him the wedding was fake. Said he didn't know. I snorted. He knew enough to keep his mouth shut. He looked like a kicked puppy. Good. But deep down, even that didn't satisfy me. Not really. Because no matter how bad he felt, no matter how much she lied to him too, I was the one left holding the pieces. They got their fun. I got the fallout. I stayed at Jason's for 3 days. On the second night, I got another message from her. Just one line. I talked to a lawyer. I'll sign whatever you want. No fight. No last-ditch effort. Just surrender. It almost made me feel sick. Like even the divorce wasn't about us. It was about image, about damage control. She wasn't fighting because she had nothing left to fight for. Not because she understood what she did, but because she'd already made peace with losing me. Like I was just a chapter in a story she'd already outgrown. I didn't respond. I just sent the papers. On the 4th day, Jason and I drove to the lake. The same lake she said she'd gone to with her parents. The place where all this started. I wanted to see it for myself, to stand on the same ground where she betrayed me. It felt like walking into enemy territory. The lake was quiet, peaceful, a few cabins scattered around the water's edge. I could imagine her there, smiling, laughing, lying. We walked to the dock. I looked out at the water and thought about that first night back when she kissed me goodbye and said she'd call when she could. I'd stood at our window, watching her drive away, thinking about how much I missed her already. What a fool I was. Jason lit a cigarette. "You okay?" "I don't know," I said, "but I feel lighter." And I did. Not good. Not healed. But like something had finally snapped inside me and released all the pressure. We left the lake in silence. I didn't need to say anything. That place was her chapter, not mine. And I was done reading it. The next week, I moved out of the house. Took only what was mine. Left the furniture, the dishes, even the bed. Let her keep the set she stained with her secrets. I started over in a small apartment downtown. Nothing fancy. Just quiet. Clean. Honest. And for the first time in a long time, I could breathe. Starting over was strange. I hadn't lived alone in years. The silence wasn't comforting at first. It was loud. Deafening, even. There were no footsteps echoing in the hallway. No voice calling from the kitchen. No perfume lingering in the air after she walked by. At first, I thought I'd go mad from it. But slowly, the quiet became a kind of freedom. I didn't have to tiptoe around anyone's moods, didn't have to guess whether a smile was real or a setup for another lie. My space became mine again. Every corner, every drawer, every breath. I focused on the basics: eating, sleeping, showing up to work. I cut my hours, focused on freelance projects, kept things light. My coworkers knew something had happened, but no one had the guts to ask. They just gave me space. I appreciated that more than they knew. One evening, I stopped by a local bookstore. I used to go there with her, back when everything felt real. Now I walked those same aisles alone, touching covers and flipping pages like I was reconnecting with parts of myself she'd buried. I picked up a journal. Blank pages. A fresh start. I hadn't written anything personal in years, but something about it felt right. I started writing every night. Not about her, not directly. More like feelings. Fragments. Thoughts I couldn't say out loud without choking. Some entries were angry. Others were quiet. A few ended in ink smudges from holding the pen too tightly. It helped. One night, while journaling, I wrote something that stuck with me. "I'm not angry she cheated. I'm angry that I let someone like her into the most sacred parts of me." That was it. That was the real betrayal. She didn't just lie. She took everything I gave willingly, everything vulnerable and raw, and treated it like it was disposable. Like I was disposable. Around that same time, I got a message from someone I didn't expect, Blake. He sent a long, guilt-ridden paragraph about how he wanted to come clean with everything. Said Maddie had painted me out to be a controlling, distant husband who pressured her into a wedding she didn't want. She'd spun a sob story about how she felt trapped and unloved. He admitted he fell for it. "She's dangerous, man," he wrote. "Emotionally. The way she talks, it makes you feel like you're the one hurting her." "I'm sorry I didn't see it sooner." I didn't respond. What was the point? He wasn't wrong. She did have a gift. She could cry without tears and manipulate with just enough truth sprinkled into her lies to make it believable. The scary part? I think she believed her own stories. That made her even more dangerous. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized. No court appearances, no drama. Just a signature. A single page that ended something we thought would last forever. And just like that, I was no longer someone's husband. I celebrated by doing something stupid. I bought a motorcycle. It was reckless, maybe even cliché, but it felt right. Fast. Loud. Something Maddie would have hated. I rode with no destination, just wind and noise and freedom wrapping around me like armor. But freedom comes with its own weight. One night, I passed the street where she and I used to get ice cream after late movies. I don't know why I stopped. I just did. Parked the bike, sat on a bench, and watched couples come and go. Laughing, holding hands, living in the lie I used to believe. I didn't feel jealous. Just detached. Like I was watching another version of myself from the outside. A guy who thought loyalty was enough. A guy who thought love could fix everything. I stayed there until the place closed. Didn't even get ice cream. Just sat in the shadows and remembered. Weeks passed. And then, one afternoon, I saw her again. At a grocery store of all places. She was in line ahead of me, hair longer, dressed casually. She didn't see me until she did. Our eyes locked. For 3 seconds. She opened her mouth, like she might say something. I turned and walked out. Didn't even buy what I came for. And as I stepped into the parking lot, I realized something that stopped me in my tracks. I didn't feel anything. No heat in my chest. No rush of memories. No anger. No sadness. Just nothing. It was over. For real. She wasn't mine. And thank God for that. That night, I sat on my balcony with a beer and my journal in my lap. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft reds and bruised purples. I wrote one line across the page. She doesn't get to live in my head anymore. And I meant it. There was something final about seeing her in that grocery store. Something clean. It wasn't a dramatic scene. No shouting. No tears. Just a silent acknowledgement that we were strangers again. And this time, I didn't flinch. I had changed. Not in the way she tried to claim I had: cold, distant, unloving. No, I had grown. I had seen what happens when you let the wrong person into your soul. I had learned what betrayal really looked like up close, quiet, calculated, and wearing the face you used to kiss goodnight. A week later, Jason and I went hiking up north. He said I needed to breathe different air. And he was right. Out there, surrounded by pine trees and dirt trails and zero phone signal, I remembered what peace felt like. It didn't look like a wedding ceremony. It didn't wear a white dress. It looked like solitude, strength, and knowing you'd survived something that should have broken you. We reached the top of a ridge and stood looking out over the valley. Jason cracked open 2 waters and passed one to me. You look different, he said. Lighter. I feel different. Still think about her? I paused. Sometimes. But it doesn't hurt anymore. He nodded. That's how you know you're healing. And I was. Slowly, like skin growing over a burn. Some parts still tender. Some days worse than others. But the worst was over. A few weeks after that, I got a message on Facebook. It was from a woman named Hannah. Said she used to work with Maddie. I almost ignored it, thinking it was some leftover thread from the past. But curiosity won. She said she didn't want to stir up drama, just felt like I deserved to know the full truth. Turns out Maddie had been cheating long before the wedding. Blake wasn't the first. There was someone else. A coworker. A guy named Ethan. They'd had a thing on and off for almost a year. Even while we were planning the ceremony. I sat there reading the message in complete silence. No emotion. Just a dull, bitter confirmation of what my gut had whispered all along. I didn't respond to Hannah. I didn't need more details. I didn't need to know what days, what times, what rooms she'd done it in. The picture was already clear enough. Maddie hadn't just made a mistake on a family trip. She'd built a pattern. A life of deception carefully sewn into her everyday routine. And I had almost tied myself to that for life. I folded my laptop shut and went for a run. Long and hard. No music. Just the pounding of my feet against the pavement, the rhythm of breath and motion pulling me forward, forward, always forward. Because that's where I was going now. No more looking back. Months passed. Spring turned to summer. I traveled more. Worked harder. I met new people, some good, some forgettable. I even went on a few dates. Nothing serious. But enough to remind myself that trust wasn't impossible, just fragile. And next time, I'd be damn careful with who I gave it to. One night, I was having dinner with some friends, and the topic of relationships came up. Someone asked what I'd learned from my last one. I didn't hesitate. Listen to your gut. And if someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. It got quiet for a moment. Then someone said, damn, that's real. Yeah, it was. Because now I knew better. Not just about love, but about myself. I knew I could survive heartbreak without becoming bitter. I could face betrayal without becoming cynical. And most importantly, I could lose someone I once thought I couldn't live without and still breathe, still walk, still live. The version of me that walked down the aisle all those months ago was dead and buried, and in his place stood someone stronger, smarter, sharper, not broken, just rebuilt. Life has a strange way of giving back pieces of you after it rips them away. Not all at once, not with fanfare, but slowly, in moments you almost miss, until you catch yourself laughing again without forcing it, or waking up without that tightness in your chest, or hearing a love song and not immediately wanting to smash the radio. It was around the start of fall when I realized something had changed. I was walking through the park on a Sunday afternoon. Crisp air, orange leaves crunching under my boots, kids throwing a football nearby. I passed a couple on a bench, young, maybe mid-20s. She had her head on his shoulder. He was tracing circles on her hand without even looking down. They weren't talking, just sitting, comfortable. A few months ago, that would have stabbed something in me. But not this time. This time, I smiled. Because I knew what they had. I also knew how easily it could be taken for granted. How quickly love turns into illusion if you're not careful. And I learned to respect it now, even from afar. I sat on a nearby bench and pulled out my phone. I wasn't checking for texts. I didn't expect any from her. And by now, I wouldn't answer if they came. No, I just wanted to capture that moment. The stillness. The realization that I was okay. Not perfect, but whole. A few days later, I got a call from my lawyer. She told me Maddie had signed the last of the paperwork, transferring ownership of some shared accounts and a small investment we'd made before the wedding. It was over. Legally, financially. Nothing tied us together anymore. Do you want me to send you a copy of the finalized agreement? She asked. No, I said. Just file it. I hung up and leaned back in my chair, eyes on the ceiling. Free. That word felt different now. Not just single, not just unburdened, but free from the lies, the shame, the nights spent questioning myself. A few people from my past started reaching out again. Friends I drifted from during the chaos of wedding planning and early marriage. Some had heard rumors, bits of the story, but none of them pried. They just asked if I was doing better, if I wanted to catch up. And I did. For the first time in a while, I wanted to be around people again. I started saying yes to things. Weekend trips, dinners, late-night drives. I started learning to say no, to people, to situations, to anything that smelled like manipulation or half-truths. One evening, Jason and I were at his place, sitting on the porch like always. He handed me a beer, and we stared out at the stars. You ever think about her anymore? He asked. Not really, I said. Sometimes, but not like before. She ever reach out again? Nope. He took a sip and nodded. You dodged AF *****ing missile, man. I know. Then he looked at me, a grin creeping up. You think you'll fall in love again? I didn't answer right away. I thought about it. I think so, I said. But next time, it'll be different. I won't be blind. He raised his bottle. To seeing clearly. We clinked. That night, I went home and opened my journal. I hadn't written in a while, not because I didn't need to, but because I'd been too busy living. That was a good thing. A sign of progress. Still, I flipped to a fresh page and wrote. She taught me how to spot poison disguised as love. And I'll never swallow that again. I closed the journal, turned out the light, and slept better than I had in a year. And somewhere out there, I hoped Maddie found what she was looking for. Or maybe, just maybe, I hoped she never did. So she'd always remember the moment I smiled, handed her the file, and walked away without looking back. Because that was the day I stopped being her victim and became my own damn hero. A few months passed, and winter rolled in hard. Cold, sharp, unapologetic, kind of like the last version of myself I'd had to become. But I wasn't bitter anymore. I wasn't holding on to the past like a wound I kept poking just to feel something. It had healed. The scar was still there, sure. But scars are proof you survived, not that you're broken. One Saturday, I ran into someone unexpected at a coffee shop. Her name was Emily. We dated for a few years before I met Maddie. It hadn't ended badly, just fizzled out as our lives went in different directions. She was always kind, soft-spoken, the kind of person who made you feel calm just by existing near you. She spotted me first. Ryan, she said, a little surprised. I looked up. Emily. We both smiled. She asked if she could sit. I nodded. We talked for almost 2 hours. About everything and nothing. She asked about my life, and I gave her the cliff notes, left out the ugliest parts, just enough for honesty without dragging my ghost into her coffee. She told me she was working in nonprofit now. She looked the same, but happier. More grounded. Eventually, she glanced at my hand and asked, Are you divorced? I said, not flinching. It was quick. For the best. She nodded slowly. I'm sorry. Don't be, I said. I'm not. There was a pause. Then, like something shifted in the air, she smiled again, this time a little differently. Not out of politeness, but with curiosity. You want to grab dinner sometime? I wasn't expecting that. For a second, I didn't answer. But then I heard my own voice, calm and certain. Yeah, I'd like that. And just like that, something opened. Not in a desperate, searching for replacement kind of way, but in a quiet, earned way. Like life saying, you've carried enough. Let me give you something good now. We started seeing each other. Slowly. No rush, no illusions. I told her early on what had happened with Maddie. Not the tabloid version, just the truth. She listened. Really listened. And when I was done, she didn't pity me. She respected me. One night, after a dinner where we talked for hours about old movies and childhood regrets, she looked at me across the table and said, "You don't talk like someone who was destroyed. You talk like someone who got through fire and figured out how not to burn next time." That stuck with me. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed to be impressed. She was the kind who wanted honesty, even when it was messy. That scared me a little, but in the best way, because it meant this was real. It wasn't about distraction. It wasn't about filling space. It was about building something from scratch. One night, as we lay in bed, I found myself watching her sleep. The way her hair fell over her cheek, how her breathing was steady and warm. I felt a flicker of fear deep in my chest, because now that I'd been broken once, the idea of trusting again felt like climbing without a harness. But then I remembered something I'd written in my journal weeks ago. You either live scared and safe, or brave and open. One gives you peace. The other gives you nothing. I closed my eyes and chose peace. And Maddie? I never heard from her again. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a whisper through the grapevine. Maybe she left town. Maybe she burned through someone else. I didn't care. Her chapter was closed. Not with rage. Not with vengeance. But with silence. The best kind of ending is the one that doesn't need a final word. Just a full stop. And mine? It was already written. And I was already halfway into a better story. Spring came again, like it always does, quiet, patient, persistent. And with it, life began to feel like it belonged to me again. Emily and I weren't rushing anything. We weren't labeling it. But we spent more and more time together. She'd come over with a bottle of wine and cook barefoot in my kitchen, or we'd sit in the park eating sandwiches from a food truck and laughing about things that didn't matter. For the first time in what felt like years, I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder. No second-guessing, no wondering what was real and what was fake. Just breathing. Just being. One night after dinner, she was flipping through an old photo album I'd shoved in the back of my closet. She stopped on a picture of Maddie and me, dressed in our wedding outfits, frozen in that perfect lie of a moment. Emily didn't say anything, just looked at it for a second before gently closing the album. "I'm not afraid of your past," she said. I looked at her, and for a second, I felt that old voice in my head whisper, "But what if it happens again? What if she's just better at pretending?" But then she reached out, touched my hand, and it shut that voice right up. "You've been through hell," she said softly, "but you didn't come out bitter. That matters." I didn't say anything right away, just held onto her hand like it was the only anchor I needed. A few weeks later, I ran into someone I hadn't seen since before the wedding, Rachel, a mutual friend of Maddie and me. She was always the neutral type, never took sides, always smiled. But this time, she wasn't smiling. "I heard what happened," she said quietly, eyes full of a kind of sadness I wasn't used to seeing. "I didn't know she was doing all that behind your back." I shrugged. A lot of people didn't. "I should have seen it," she said, voice trembling. She was always restless, like she couldn't sit still inside her own life. "She wasn't ready," I said simply. "She wanted the wedding, not the marriage." Rachel nodded, then hesitated. "She's living with someone new now, a guy she met at some corporate retreat." I felt nothing. Not jealousy, not anger, not even surprise. "Hope he knows how to run background checks," I said with a dry smile. Rachel laughed. Then her eyes softened. "You look good, Ryan. You look better." "I am." When she walked away, I stood there for a while, just taking it in. I was finally past the part of the story where she mattered. And that was everything. One evening, I sat on the balcony again, journal open, the city buzzing quietly below. I looked at the blank page and knew this would be the last entry I'd write about her. I wrote, "I gave everything to a woman who never planned to keep it. I was broken, humiliated, and nearly destroyed. But I learned, and I healed, and I rose." So if you're reading this, whoever you are, if you've been lied to, if you've been cheated on, if someone made you feel worthless, you're not. You are not what they did to you. You are who you choose to become next. I closed the journal and leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly into the cool night air. Emily walked out with 2 mugs of tea, sat beside me, and said nothing. She didn't have to. Sometimes, the best kind of love doesn't arrive with fireworks and loud declarations. Sometimes, it arrives quietly. After the storm, a few months later, I found myself standing on the same dock where it all started, the lake where Maddie took that family trip, the one that shattered everything. It was early morning. Fog hung low over the water. The air was cool, but not biting. Peaceful. I came here alone, not for answers, because I wasn't searching anymore. I just wanted to stand where the lie began and prove to myself that it no longer owned me. I looked out over the lake, hands in my jacket pockets, and realized something I hadn't allowed myself to admit until now. I was grateful. Not for the pain, not for her, but for the clarity. Because if Maddie hadn't betrayed me, I might still be living a lie. I might still be walking on eggshells, mistaking her moods for depth, her cruelty for strength, her manipulation for mystery. I might have built a life with a woman who had no intention of building one with me. Sometimes, the universe doesn't whisper. It rips the floor out from under you so you have no choice but to wake up. And when you do, you start walking differently. Wiser. Sharper. More aware of what you will never tolerate again. I took one last look at the water and turned to leave. As I walked back to the car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Emily. Come over tonight? I miss you. I smiled. Not because I needed her to be okay, but because I wanted to share this new version of myself with someone who had earned it. Someone who saw the wreckage and still stayed. Someone who didn't try to fix me, but gave me the space to rebuild on my own. I texted back, I'll bring wine. Then I slid my phone in my pocket, opened the door, and drove away from the lake for the last time. No looking back. No what-ifs. No ghosts. Just me. Alive. Healed. And finally, truly free.